Hey everybody, welcome back to the shed. My gosh, it's getting cold. So I've got a bit of a deadline. I've got 2 weeks to get all of that looking like an engine and then looking like a van. I've got bits down here, I've got bits up there, I've got a bit of a van out there, and we've got to make it all happen. So, camping in 2 weeks, there's no way the van's going to be finished by then, but it does need to be running because that's our only way of getting there. So, time for cleaning. Got to get the head cleaned. No great secret to this, just going to be scrubbing it with anything that'll take off the burnt on oil. Get it all back to, well, clean. Get it reassembled, back in the van, turn the key and obviously it'll start. Maybe. Alright, let's see how we go. Right, we're slowly working through the cleaning, so most of the head parts are coming up alright. It's never going to look like a brand new engine because, well, it's not a brand new engine. When I cleaned up the injectors, I mean, you want to get them as clean as possible. I don't know if this will pick it up, but the business end of the injector, that little nib on the end, that's got very, very tiny holes. That's where the fuel comes through. So that's where it gets sprayed into the engine. As much as the camera won't pick it up, a bit too small, you can actually see the pinholes. So for me, the main thing is making sure that they're clean and that the body of the injector's clean, so that it'll slide in and out. So they're all starting to get cleaned. I'm just cleaning off the cams. The light's not very good down here. So this is basically how the cams came out of the engine. I'm just cleaning them up now. I've not bothered filming all the cleaning because at the end of the day it's just cleaning. And you can see I've just started to clean off there. Now I did wonder if this was a coating because of how uniform and thick these black bands were, but it's not. It's really stuck on oil. So whether this is either overheated or just not had oil changes for a very long time, I don't know. I mean, it's an engine, so you'd expect oil, you'd expect old oil to be ground in, but I'm noticing on some of these parts, I think the engine's had very old oil in it, or it has been overheated, and it surprised me really how well this engine ran, because it really did run a treat. But now everything's cleaned up, it should be able to run a bit easier. I'll get all this scrubbed off, and I'll show you what it's like. What I'm using to clean it is just a solvent degreaser. I picked this up from the local tool shop, tool station. They had to order it in for me, but it came in next day, and that's what I'm using to clean the injectors, and that's what I'm using to keep me awake, because it's hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of cleaning. One of those things I just quite frankly wish I'd never started, but it's all good fun. So back to scrubbing. well, the head's back on. Just get this up. Okay, so I couldn't video it last night because the weather was so bad, and I needed to get it done. It's still quite windy and wet here, but I managed to get the head on. I put the exhaust manifold and the turbo onto the head before I put the head onto the block. It's just so much easier. As you can see, there's not a lot of space down there, and with how wet it is, I don't fancy crawling around on the floor any more than I need to. Me and a mate lifted the block in, which was fun, and then putting the head on, it's just so straightforward. Just follow the manual, follow the pattern for the bolts, torque the stages up, do your degrees. It's really not that difficult at all. The front intake goes on really nice and easy. Just pop the glow plugs in. I don't know if you can see them. There's the glow plug just behind that rusty bolt. So put the glow plugs in and the glow plug lead before you put the air intake on, because you've got very little chance of doing it once that's on. And now it's going to be a matter of buttoning up all around the back. I'm going to get the timing done. This is literally just been out overnight, and you can see how the rust's, I mean, it's only surface rust, it'll wipe off. I'm not concerned, it's not knackered the engine or anything, but that's literally just where moisture's got to it overnight. I did try to cover the top, but before I put the injectors in, I'll just crank the engine over just to blow out any of the debris that's in there. It should blow it out of the injector ports, which are down there. It's always been my intention with this engine to just run some cheap oil through it. Literally just put it through a few cycles, dump the oil, because that'll flush out any debris from cleaning it out, and then put some decent oil in. So I think next stage is just to get down here a bit more buttoned up. But before I put too much on down here, the hole for the timing is behind the manifold, just there. So that's where you lock the flywheel, and then the holes at the side, you see the gap, and there's a hole just behind, and that's where you lock the cams. It's the same on the front and the back. So I want to get the timing done, get the timing chain on and the tensioners. Before going too much further, before putting the timing chain on, I've got to put the chain on at the bottom for the oil pump. But again, I've been leaving that for as long as possible. The bottom's open so that if anything went in through the top, it's got a good chance of falling out through the bottom. This is the joys of not having a garage and doing this kind of work. But as long as you take your time with it, everything should be fine. So I'm going to get cracked on with that now. It's really windy. I don't know if the camera will stand up on a tripod, so I'll try and record what I can. If not, I'll keep coming back periodically so you can see where I'm going. Okay, just thought I'd give you a quick catch up with where I'm at. The manual I've got, which I think is a Ford manual, it lies. It says to basically get the oil pump in, but finger tight. So there's 5 bolts, including the pickup, the plastic pickup. So get them finger tight, pop the chain on, take measurements from the crank sprocket and a relative measurement from the oil pump, level them up, pop the chain on, and pop the tension on. That's just a 3mm drill bit, just to take the tension out the chain tensioner. But it lies, because when you put the oil pump on, there's a little, I don't know if you can make it out on here, there's a part of the casting from the aluminium that goes on the bottom of the block that stops the chain going through, or I couldn't find a way of getting past it anyway. Not with the pump on. As soon as you take the pump off, you can drop the chain through, and it's quite simple. So just thought I'd give you the heads up on that. you know, you might be cleverer than me, but I couldn't find a way past it. So now that all that's on, I'm just going to go to where it wants to work happily and tighten the bolts up from there. And it's glorious Cheshire weather, peeing it down and soggy legs. So then we'll get this on and try and roll it in through the doors, work on it inside. Okay, I don't know if you can hear, but it's absolutely lashing down outside, so I figured it was easiest to show you this inside before I bring the van in. So this is replacing the timing chain. It's pretty straightforward. A couple of things just to note really. On the new chain, I don't know if you can see the two copper coloured links, they line up with the sprockets that go onto the cams. I got this as a complete kit. They're not very much money. I think we got this off eBay, and it comes with everything that you see there apart from the bolts. The bolts are reused, just cleaned up, check the threads, they're good, but everything else came with the kit. The bolts are just 8mm bolts. This is the tensioner that puts tension into the chain. Don't pull the pin before you've got everything in, because once you pull that, it pushes the piston out, which pushes the tension on this to take the slack out of the chain. The bottom of the chain goes around the crank pulley, goes around the sprocket on the crank, and everything else should just go in. The bolts that go into the cam, when you put these in, leave them loose. So take them up finger tight, but so that the sprocket can still move. And you'll find that when you take the tension, when you put the tension onto the chain, they will move slightly. I mean, this is the first time I've done it on this, but I've done plenty of timing chains, timing belts, especially on VAGs, and it's exactly the same system. So usually you'll put the sprocket so that the holes are roughly in the middle, or as much in the middle as you can get them, and then when you put the tension on the chain, it will slightly pull these to where they need to be, especially on the exhaust. It'll just pull it round a touch to take up the tension in the chain, tighten them all up, and away you go. Even if that sprocket does move slightly, all it'll be doing is pulling the tension in across here and just pulling itself down. The timing marks will still stay the same. And to hold the sprockets into place, 6mm drill bits. Earlier in the video I showed you where the holes were in the head, so going through here you'll see a hole. 6mm drill bit will pin that into place, and on the bell housing, on the block part where the block meets the bell housing right at the back, you'll be able to take out the sensor for that goes on the flywheel, the crank sensor. You'll be able to undo that, and then this is just the handle off my tap and die set, but it fits. You'll be able to insert that in to lock it at TDC, top dead center. Because I'm doing the full build on this and stripping it and working it up, I noticed when I took well, you'll still need to take the pulley off. There's a slight, like a dowel, that's at about 11 o'clock on where the pulley attaches to the crank. So it isn't quite at 12 o'clock, it's around 11 o'clock. But you'll find when you go to put this pin in, it should only fit in one place. But I just figured this was an easier way of showing you so you know what to expect. On the rebuild videos, on the rebuild manuals that I've been reading, it does say to replace the cover that goes over the top of this with a new one. I've really struggled to get hold of one. The one that I took off, I can't see any reason why you would replace it. I'll be replacing the crank seal that goes into that plate, so that'll be a new seal. But in terms of actually replacing the plate, I can't see a reason for replacing it, so I'm not replacing mine. It's going to get cleaned up, the sealant the old silicone sealant taken off it, fresh applied, obviously give it a good clean, and I'm going to go with that. So if I do get any issues, I'll let you know. By the time I've posted this video, the van should be running, and I will have ran it for a bit, so I'll be able to let you know if there was any leaks. But I can't see a reason for replacing it. Once it's clean, it's clean. If you end up prying the plate off and bending it out of shape, that might cause issues if you can't get it flat enough to reinstall. But apart from that, I just can't see a reason, so long as you're replacing the seal. And just whilst I think about it, on this I won't be replacing the water pump or anything like that. One, I can't really see a reason for doing it. There's nothing up with the one that I'm doing, but I will be installing an air conditioning compressor. So I'm going to probably have to alter where the alternator, power steering pump, etc. are, and it depends how that system comes off the donor vehicle. So that's why I'm not bothering with that at the minute. I'm expecting to dismantle it. I just want to get the engine up and running for now, so that I can work on it and get the rest of the conversion done. Right, we've got her inside now, so I don't know if you can hear it absolutely hammering down. Okay, so you show you around the back, and you can just make out. There we go. See the bolt there that goes through? That just locks the flywheel. And on this, if you can see, there's a Torx bit there. That's around 11 o'clock. It's not quite true 12. And that's where it sits on this engine. So now, going to be taking out the engine mount. I had to put the engine mount back on just to secure everything whilst I could bolt other things on. So going to be a block of wood under the engine. I haven't put the sump back on yet because I knew I was going to be doing this bit, so it gives me, show it, gives me some space to put a block of wood, jack the engine up, take the mount off, and putting the timing on's the relatively easy bit. If you're going as far as this and you're stripping the head, just try and, when you put the cams back in the head, try and make sure that these little notches here are pointing as close to straight down as you can. You're going to get some resistance off these springs of the valves, but if you can get them close, it'll make doing the timing a lot easier, because you don't want the valves trying to press against the pistons as you pull the cams round, just to stop it clattering. So yeah, I'll pop you back up now, mount off, timing on, and then that should be the last time that engine mount comes off. Right, so what I've just done here, these are just two 6mm drill bits, and if you can make out the underneath, where they go through underneath, they just line up into a hole, and then the nuts are literally just almost ready to be tightened, but it means that we can adjust these two cogs. So you've got the arrow at the top of each one, and that'll line up with the copper link on the chain. I'm going to pop the chain in next. Usually, even with tensioners and what have you, in slack, and then there can still be a bit of a pig to get around the teeth of the cogs. So I'll get the chain in next, then the guides, and then the tensioner. The top one goes into these two here, and then the sprung tensioner that's got the pin in it goes in this one down here, and then one guide just sits over the one that's got the tensioner. It's just got a hole at the top, so it pivots on this, and then the other two screw into threads in the casting. So it's pretty straightforward. Well, assuming it starts, it's pretty straightforward. We'll see. Right, went in pretty simple. It was a little bit of a faff. What I found is undo the exhaust cog and leave it off, but I did leave the copper link attached where the arrow is, just to keep that in place. Got this tensioner in first to keep the chain taut from the inlet sprocket down to the crank, because with this one being the adjustment at the back of the engine, that's where you want your slack. So once I've got that in, like I say, keep that as tight as you can around the crank, up around the tensioner guide, around the sprockets. They're still quite loose, so they will move. Everything's all in place, so then it's like a grenade pin. Just pull the pin out of that, and that should put the tension on the chain. Obviously everything's bolted down as well. There we go. So that's taken the slack up on the chain. There's quite a lot of pressure on that. I can just move it, but I'm glad my fingers weren't in the way. And then that's pulled these sprockets round, so I can tighten them up now. And then that's pulled everything round. There's nothing loose on them, so I'd say we're all good. So I'll get them tight, drill bits removed, and then turn the crank. Got to turn it round twice. So take the drill bits out, take the bolt out on the flywheel, turn the crank twice, and then when it comes back, so that the piston's at top dead centre, so that you can put the crank pin back in place. These drill bits should go back into the holes. If they don't, strip it off, start again. So assuming all of this works when I spin it twice, it'll be cover on and engine mounts back on, and then that should be the last time of touching this. If it doesn't work, I'll come back and have a look at it with you as to why it's not worked, but I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be. Just check your manual for it is quite important that these are torqued upright, because the last thing you want is for them to start slipping. There's no clearance on the valves on these, so if it's not right, your valves will clatter into your pistons. So just check your specs. That's why I'm being cautious about not showing you what I use, because if I've got it wrong, I don't want to be responsible for anybody else's engine, which is why I say this isn't a guide. All you're doing is following what I've done, and hopefully it'll highlight things for you so you know what you're getting into. But check your torque settings, make sure everything's torqued up right. Same for your guides. This is probably one of the most important parts of the engine. Most things go on an engine, you can repair them. This goes, you can be into a world of hurt. So it's nothing difficult, nothing beyond the average person. If you can read and use a spanner, you should be pretty okay. But just go by it step by step. Certainly don't need any specialist tools for doing it at all. Right, fitting the alternator on these can be a bit of a pig. There's no tension pulley, so the tension on the belt is just literally bolt the alternator to it, and it's kind of self-tensions. I've not been too bothered about changing this because I'm going to be putting aircon on this engine, so there'll be an aircon compressor at the back of the block, and then if you can see underneath the engine mount, there's like a bolt that sticks out. On these engines that have aircon, there's a tension pulley goes on there, which makes perfect sense. Getting the alternator on, this is a new alternator, is a pig. I've only found 2 videos for it on YouTube, and conveniently they don't show the actual alternator going on. I've struggled with this. I've really struggled with this. I tried to do it with the radiator pack still in place, and you can get the alternator in there and you can squeeze things around. I just could not get the bolts, in particular this bottom left one, could not get that to go in without threading at all. It was an absolute nightmare. There you go, the one that's part sticking out. So I thought, whilst I was here, I'd just put a quick note. I've actually rebuilt the engine runs absolutely fine. The alternator was a problem, so I'm not quite sure where in the video this will come in. But I thought, well, whilst I was here, I didn't want anybody else to struggle the way I have with this, because it's been a nightmare. But I would recommend doing it without the rad pack on. All I've done is drain the coolant, taken off the 2 top hoses, the intercooler comes off dead easy, and just swing the rad pack out the way just to give myself access. And if I'd have done that in the first place, I'd have probably saved myself an hour of faffing around. So as much as it's pain in the backside draining coolant, for me, the cost of coolant against the cost of my time, I'd much rather just move the rad pack out the way, give yourself access, it flies straight in then. Literally within 2 or 3 minutes of taking the rad pack out, because I've got proper access, I could put a bit of leverage on, but that bottom left hand bolt first, then the right hand bolt, and then the top one, you've got enough leverage. Trying to do it the other way around, which is what I started with the top bolt in first, thinking, well, if I'm hanging it in position, I've only got to move the bottom. It's too much tension on the belt. I just couldn't get it seated right. And I've checked the threads on the bolts. I mean, they're 9-year-old bolts, but the threads looked okay. But I know, because I was trying to snatch it and torque it up, like get the bolt to bring everything in line, it just wasn't doing the threads any good at all. The moisture you can see down there on the power steering pump is because it's raining. But I have also got to change this power steering line here. That nut there is seized, and it's not holding the coolant at all. So there is, I don't know if you can make it out actually on the pipe, there's power steering fluid on there. It's not massive amounts, but especially when you're on full lock, the pressure does push it out. So that's on the to-do list. I'll probably do that at the same time as doing the air compressor pump. But yeah, just a little note. Didn't think it was worth a video. Just wanted to pop this in whilst I was here. It just seems to be running quite well. Fired straight up. I'd left the crank sensor unplugged. That's on the casing between the engine and the gearbox. As soon as I plugged that in, she fired straight up. So just running it up to temperature now so I can bleed through the coolant. But so far so good. I did notice the downpipe was cracked as well that comes off the turbo, so I've had to weld that up. But so far so good. So we'll run her up to temperature and see if she leaks or wants to run.